Welcome back everybody to the final Fast and Fun video of the year. It's Rich here, and in this video I wanted to take a look back at the running costs, the ownership costs of running my 6-car garage during 2024. The 6 cars being the Renault Megane RS250 Cup, my Range Rover L322, my Mark 1 MX5, my Clio 182, my Audi R8 and my Blob Iron Pretzer STI. 6 cars in the garage. What does it cost? I'm going to cover spares, repairs, servicing, MOTs as the first category. So that's the true sort of maintenance side of the cars and each of the cars. We'll then look at road tax or vehicle excise duty tax. We'll look at insurance, and then we'll finish off looking at the silent enemy, which many people discount, which is hidden, which is that depreciation, the value of the cars over the perceived 12 months. And obviously that's indicative because you only get to know the true value once you sell the vehicle. And I'm going to wrap that up into one final cost, what I think it's cost me to have these 6 cars in the garage during 2024. Just before we go into each individual car, we'll just start by saying 1 new car into the garage, 1 car left. The new car was in January, February, my Range Rover L322 here. The car that left in March, which was the Mitsubishi Shogun Sport. In fact, I actually sold that for £400 more than I paid for it 3.5 years before. So that was a really, really good car at holding its value because it was down at that sort of saturated point where the bottomless, they just don't drop below that floor price. So let's go into the first category then, and that is servicing, maintenance, repair, MOTs. And we'll start with, let's start with some good news. So costs for maintenance, repair, testing, MOTs, etc. on the Clio, grand total of 0. No point, nothing. That, on the face of it, sounds absolutely brilliant, but that's because it's not got an MOT, it's not been serviced, it's not failed or needing to be repaired, because the bad news is it wasn't used at all. It was never used during 2024. It's now been off the road for about 18 months. So I really, really, really need to get this car up and running in 2025. It was my promise to myself this winter, I would take some time out to sort this car out. As you can see, some of the boys have obviously been in. I told them not to touch the flipping paintwork, and they've been in writing stuff in the dirt. It is really bad condition with regard to dust, but there's a few niggles it's got to have done to it. It will then be due a cam belt, and then I want to get this back on the road in 2025. It is the old school feel. I do miss it. It really adds something. It adds that lightweight, hot hatch fun that I think now we've gone. In fact, they were going. This for me was the last of the breed. In fact, it's a very late 182, this, a late 05. No costs, but no use. Next best is the Mark 1 MX5. Didn't get serviced this year because it didn't do enough mileage. I'm not exactly sure what mileage it did do. It feels about 1,000 miles. High hundreds, that's all. So very light use. But it did get used, but not enough for me to service it because I serviced it in 2024 and it's done so little mileage. It did need a battery, £66. That was a real pain, actually, because I'd bought in 2023 a Panasonic gel battery for this, and it goes in this rear quarter in the boot. And that was a genuine one at £130, £140 or something. And it failed just after a year old. They're not good at being put on battery tenders, those gel batteries. The car really needs to be used or disconnected all the time. So, do you know what? I got really hacked off with it. I've just got one from Halford, £66, smashed that in there, and that's on a permanent C-Tech trickle charger, and there's been no issue since. Headlight, MOT, a drop link, which I did, a couple of tyres, £380. All in, Important things to the MX5, because of its simplicity, I do nearly all the work, servicing, maintenance on the car. So £380, and that's been, again, cheap as chips really to run. So next we're going to go out of the barn in to see the Range Rover, which is not quite as good story as the Clio and the MX5. So things didn't quite go as well regarding the Range Rover, but that's really, I suppose, to be expected. Various things throughout the 10 or 11 months of ownership during 2024, and I will cover a detailed review of all the costs on the L322 Range Rover in the new year when I do a video just about the running costs of this car. But high level, let me down on one occasion, went into limp home mode. There was a few issues. One was around the exhaust manifold temp sensor fault, which was a bit of a pain to change. Aircon, few general suspension components. We also gave it a full service as well. Was in the garage twice. And because I don't do much or any work on the Range Rover itself, that came in at a pretty hefty £2,650 all in for parts and obviously for labour. So that, a bit of a punch in the kidneys there with it associated. But this is our daily, and in this year, in the 10, 11 months we've owned it, it's just clicked onto 140,000 now. We bought it on 125, so we've put 15,000 miles on this car. Clearly, it's going to take some maintenance to keep this 12-year-old car running as well as it currently runs. So 2,650. Now go across to my daily and my track car, the Renault Megane RS250. So the Megane. Now, the Megane's had a hard year, and it's been used hard because it's been my track toy, really, as well as my daily. So the missus can drive the Range Rover. It's worked hard. It's had to do a whole host of commuting for work. It does track days. It's my daily go-to car. So again, but it's had to get ready for quite a few track days in 2024 and more in 2025. So as a result of that, this has cost more than previous years. What did I do to it? The big ones were the pads and discs. So front pads, front discs. At the front, I fitted WinMax W5 pads with standard Brembo plain discs. That was £500. The rears, plain discs with PBS Pro Race rear pads and fluid. So the rears were £380 plus the fluid. You're looking at, it was about £900, and I did most of that work myself. There was a few suspension components, anti-rotation link, 150 plus another £20, track rod end at 45, MOT at 40. Did one of the engine mounts that was £65. Real coil spring as well went on it, 160, plus got a service. So I got a service pack for just over £50, oil at £40. So adding everything up together, that came in at £1,440. The vast majority of that was just parts, because most of the work I did myself. So expensive, but that was largely driven by the pads and discs coming up to circa £900, because I wanted really, really good stopping power. And I have to highly commend that mixture of WinMax W5s up front, Pro Race pads in the rear. They absolutely took a hammering. There was never any fade. RBF 600 brake fluid as well. So big shout out there, but £1,440, predominantly parts. If you had to have labour onto that, you could probably add on another 500 to that. So not the cheapest of years for the Megane, but it's been used hard 2024, and it will be continued to be used hard during 2025. Right, let's drop down to the garages and finish off with the STI and then the R8. So into my Scooby running costs. No service this year. In fact, no MOT this year, actually, because it's expired a fair few months ago. That's about to get MOT, but it'll probably be the new year before it's MOT'd and put back on the road. Used hard in the April-May road trip that I did up in Scotland, the northwest coast of Scotland. Absolutely brilliant there. In preparation for that, I did a few things to the STI, including pads and discs front and rear. I went with Godspeed G-Hook discs and CL RC5 pads, Carbon Lorraine pads. They were they were just under £600. They, I think, are too aggressive for fast road. I wanted them for fast road. They produce an awful lot of squeaking, metal on metal sounds. They work when you're on it and you're up to temperature. They start really coming into their own. But for irregular use, when you're leaving and the cold, there's an awful lot of squeaking, a lot of metal on metal, very abrasive materials. If I had my time again, I would go with something a little bit softer, I think, than the abrasive nature of these Godspeed G-Hook discs with the CL pads. Did have a bit of an issue with the caliper that I did a video on earlier on in the year, where both my caliper bolts sheared, and so anyway, there was a long story about that. So that there was a bit of cost associated with that, but the rest of it was done again largely by myself. So this is another one that's predominantly driven by parts. Came in at about £625 for the parts for the car. It does need a service though, so I'm very aware of that. So in the new year, when it gets MOT'd, I will get it serviced as well. And I want to get it back on the road again because I love my time in the early part of the year with this. It's been off the road for the last few months since the MOT expired. But it's ready to go. This should go straight through an MOT, just get it serviced and get it back on the road. And again, some great adventures planned for 2025. But £625 for the STI. Now we'll go next door and have a look at the R8. For the R8, that had quite a lot of use, especially in the summer months. Throughout the year, it's done about 2,000 miles in the year, just maybe slightly more. It's gone up from 36 to 38,000 now. In the year, it only had an annual service down at Ricky Elder's at RB Performance in Swindon, which came in at a very modest £575. They did just the fluids, the filters, etc., and just a check of the car. And there was a sort of a slight intermittent ABS warning that would come on now and again. They cleaned up all the connectors and that seems to be fine. And then the other big cost was tyres. So they were changed. They did have Pirelli P0s on. I changed them for Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, and that came in at just under £1,960 plus MOT. So all in for the R8 was £1,575 for parts and labour for the R8 for the year. Utterly reliable, not an issue with it, not a problem with it. Ran really, really sweet. And again, I've got some really exciting plans that I want to put in place for 2025 on the R8. So next up is road tax. So vehicle exercise duty, as it should be termed. Now, if you added up all the cars in the garage, it would be quite an eye-numbering tax on all the cars. So per year, the Range Rover's over 700, the MX5's 345, the Clio and the Megane are both 385, the R8's over 700, and the STI's over 400. So total together, that would come to just under £3,000 per annum on vehicle excise duty. But I don't pay that because I don't have them all taxed at the same time. For example, the Clio has been SORN, statutory off the road notification, legally put off the road so you don't have to pay vehicle excise duty. And what I tend to do is pay by the month. So certain cars, the Range Rover is always on the road. The Megane is nearly always on the road. In fact, they're the only two cars in December this year that have been taxed, because the other four are actually SORNed and off the road. As I use them, I tax them. At the end of the month, if I'm not going to use it, I will SORN it at the end of the month. I've looked back and I am somewhere around about 120 to up to 150. Average is about, I think, £130 per month I pay, which over a year comes out at about £1,500 on vehicle exercise duty. Half what I would be paying if I taxed them all at the same time. Insurance is next up. And even if a car is off the road, I still make sure the insurance is valid, and they're always insured. I've got a group policy, 6 cars, and that comes in from the wife, myself. 2 of the cars have got business mileage on as well. Some of them have got limited mileage, but that comes in at £1,400 per annum. So probably affordable because both the wife and I we're in those early 50s, so therefore insurance premiums are much lower. I think the one thing to note on insurance, though, is that the Range Rover, the L322, accounts for over a third of that cost is for the Range Rover. So people talk about the expense of insuring Range Rovers. Yes, it's 3 times, or nearly 3 times the price, believe it or not, of the R8. And finally comes depreciation. Or if you're lucky, appreciation, where value goes up. Now, of course, this is only indicative. I've not really lost this money. You don't lose the money until you sell the car and you see where you are. And I have, in past years, believed that the value of some of the cars have appreciated. That negates some of the running costs. But 2024 has been a tough year. And these are my indicative values where I think my car's value has gone in the 12 months. First up, the Range Rover. We know, widely known, Range Rovers depreciate heavily. I paid just over £9,000 for this Westminster, last of the run model L322 from 2012. I would put that now somewhere around 6,000 or 7,000. So the potential loss of 2 to 3k. So for this exercise, I'm going to say that's lost in the 10 or 11 months, about £2,500. The Megane has suffered the next. The Megane has held up brilliantly since I bought that from a good friend of mine for a really good price. That has held firm, but the prices have definitely dropped. The bottom was always 5k, that's dropping below, and I think mine now, the high mileage it's got on it will affect its value, and I've indicatively valued that somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000. So that, for me, has dropped by about £1,000. Next up is the STI. I would say now my STI just over 100,000 miles, and I've predicted that is about £12,000. Less than I paid for it 2.5 years ago, and I think probably lost around about £500 in the year. And I think 12 is a fair price. They seem to be staying at that sort of value because there are less of those around. They're still quite difficult to get in standard form like mine. So I've put it at, I think, a conservative £500 loss for the year. As regard the Clio 182, again, indicatively, I think that's probably held firm. 3,000 to 4,000 seems to be where the market is. That's, although it's standard, so it's rare, it has done over 100,000 miles. I think that's a fair reflection of the price, and I would put that as it was probably last year. So I've put the Clio 182 as no loss. The R8, that's an interesting one. £38,000 I paid for my R8 about 15, 16 months ago now. Less than 40,000 miles, manual V8. They seem to be sat between that 35 and 40,000. It seems to be the good manual V8, less than 40,000 miles. And considering mine's got that Capristo exhaust on it as well, I'm fairly confident I could still get my money back on that car. So I've put that as a nil depreciating car. And then the MX5, probably the hardest of the lot to value. Some of the paintwork, as you can see, is blemished. Alloys still need doing, but again, it's in cracking condition, that car. And I've put that conservatively around 3,000 or 4,000, which is where I think it was 12 months ago. So again, I've said that that's probably a car that's lost no value at all. So if you tot up the Range Rover 2,500 loss, Megane at 1,000 and the STI at 500, I'm sat somewhere in the region of about 4,000 indicatively less value in the cars than they were 12 months ago. So what does that mean? Well, if we total up the 6,670-ish on servicing, maintenance, repair, MOTs, plus the 1,500 for road tax, the 1,400 for insurance, and the indicative £4,000 in loss of due to depreciation, we come to a grand total of £13,570. That is, by some margin, my most significant cost of running a 6-car garage. It is a hard number actually to swallow. But again, I put it into the context of you could be leasing a car at £500 or £600 or £700 a month. You could be buying a new car and losing significant money every single month in that depreciation. So although it's a bad pillow to swallow, I have got the choice of some relatively luxury cars in regard to things like the Range Rover, things like the R8, and then the modern classics like the STI, the Clio 182 and the Mark 1 MX5. Look, that's a hopefully interesting video for you to get an understanding, a feel for what money has to go into these cars to keep them running, keep them enjoying them, and keep the spirit of driving alive. I hope that has been informative for you. Thank you for watching my videos throughout 2024. Please continue as we move into 2025 and new journeys, new adventures start all over again. Thanks, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.